Okay, guys. So let's start at the beginning. In the sense, how much do you think Guildford and Criterion, of course, have changed? Since those early days. What's the kind of progression?
Since the early days.
The early days. Back in
I might have been
days.
around in the early days. So for me, it's changed significantly in terms of the scene and also the companies that are around and the numbers of people, and I think probably it's the volume of people and the volume of studios that are around here and turning out games. I think I read some crazy number like 8,000 or 9,000 games that have come out. Is that right? Am I making that up?
I want to go with that.
That's a good
9,000.
9,000 Guildford Games.
9,000. Yeah. Well, I did read that. So whether it's fake news or not, I don't know. But let's imagine it's true. So it's changed. Well, it's changed significantly, and I think that it's an industry of constant change. So that is where the only constant is change. So
that's it. We're constantly on that precipice of what's the next thing. Where are we kind of what are we going to fall down next that we have to learn about?
And everyone's growing. We certainly here believe in a growth mindset. So if you're constantly looking for learning and you're constantly learning new things because you're making new things, so change is the constant.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you view it, do you think? How much Guildford as a whole, how do you think that's changed?
It has, yeah. I moved down to Guildford in 1996 to join Criterion, and it was the place felt smaller back then. It felt more of a village. I think, as Matt said, there are a lot more studios now and spawned from everybody else. So I think the diversity in the community here in Guildford is huge now.
And also like tracing it as well, being able to trace,
completely.
They started here and then they ended up, oh my God, and then they made this, or they worked with that team on it. And it's all started from these very kind of humble beginnings. And then we've really
It hasn't back then, well,
out.
I don't know about Matt Studios, but we didn't know what we were doing. We were trying to invent it as we went along. There was no university courses or anything. And now we're hiring people who was the same age as me and who've been on courses and know much more than I ever did when I came into the industry. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Like, it is this area and this location has grown as the industry has grown.
Yeah.
Because you're actually making it up as you're going along. I'm hoping we're not doing so much more of that. But then there's a translation of that. You're right, when people take it and grow into new studios and and bring that experience to new people coming in. So as I welcomed our 5 new interns this week, and it's amazing to think what they're learning now. When we were starting out, was it's quite profound, the difference. They're much smarter.
They're much smarter, and they weren't here when we started.
The difference now is that like you said, Pete, that people can leave school with, I want to be a games developer, which I don't think was really the case for any of my good friends in development. I don't think any of them thought that way. We all just somehow fell into this place where we're all working with something that's,
I had that exact
amazing
conversation just this week with some of our interns where, when I was reflecting, they were talking about, how was it for me when I started, and I just loved games. Right? I didn't really consider that there might be a business in it, or there might even be a career in it until I kind of fell into it. Whereas now it's an important distinction. We talk about it in the studio as well. When you make a game, it's going to be played by millions of people, and some of your work, and it's worth reminding ourselves that some of the work that we create will be there to inspire someone to go and say, I want to go and do that, and that's quite a privilege.
Oh, it's incredible! It's absolutely incredible, and it's. From a developer standpoint, to be there when those things are happening and to have that realization, like, oh my God, people are going to love this, and millions of people are going to go crazy for this. But for the other side of it, for gamers to maybe not realize that it was just one random conversation that led to this amazing thing that happened and then got implemented and then became the star of the show, as far as whatever. It's amazing how the whole thing is very much a journey for all of us. We all just kind of mingle around and get to a point where we learn something with people that we get on with really well, and all of a sudden it all falls into place and we can make incredible games. That's why Guildford's so special, I suppose, the amount of us that are here doing it. So are there any great Guildford Games moments that you guys would say you've been involved in, even from behind the scenes, however it may be? Lots.
I think probably too many to call out. Lots of some that in the back in the mists of time. I remember I used to come down to Guildford. I worked for Electronic Arts, and I used to work with Bullfrog, and when Bullfrog were, I don't know, there was maybe 20 people on the research park, and I used to come down as a representative of EA, and we had a great relationship with Bullfrog and Electronic Arts, and I remember there's a couple of times I remember certainly with people. I remember Peter and Demis were on Theme Park, and Sean Cooper was making Syndicate, and he and I got connected on Syndicate, and I remember it was my first time when we were finishing the PC version, which was the first version out. We were in the EA building up in Langley. We'd driven up from Guildford, and it was the first time I think we did 24 hours straight, which then was like, you're young and it's like you've got all this energy.
It's fun,
for
some reason.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, you did it because, actually we weren't there, we were just there to sort of fulfill, we were actually glorified testers at the time, and because we were just trying to complete the test hours. But those are real moments where, the camaraderie and you knew you had something special, and people were excited for it, but you never knew how it was going to land. And those exciting moments when, I used to say when a game was released and you used to see it on the shelves. I guess there is a modern digital equivalent of that. Maybe it's when someone streams it and talks about it. I don't know what that might be, but those moments with Syndicate and meeting Criterion for the first time and getting involved in Need for Speed for the first time, and then with Star Wars for the first time, lots of them actually.
Yeah,
so you've got to sort of
really
segment your
sounds
eras by some sort of incredible opportunities.
You don't get those moments of gathering around the gold disc so much anymore with the
that's
champagne
true.
ready just to make sure it works.
I think the last time I saw one of those photos would have been No Man's Sky.
That was things
fantastic.
like that are amazing in Guildford for me. Having worked with people like Sean over the years, and then to see them spin up their own studio and then go huge at the announce of that game.
And the progression of that studio. I mean, just the whole thing, and it all, just feels like it's almost in the soil here. Like as long as we all pitch up and we all learn our craft and we all get to know each other, then we will make amazing games. And
I think it is a lot of that. It's because, as you said, we're taking lots of people from lots of different studios with experiences and then bringing them together in new ways. Because obviously we had Sean and other people there that worked at EA and Criterion before, with other people from, say, Bullfrog and other places that come together and bring all of that passion and find new ways to do things.
Well, and new people.
Yeah.
Because that's, I think when you see that there's this attraction. If I was, wanting to get into games, where would I go? And I think so you have that attraction, and then that brings new people with new ideas and fresh ideas, and eventually they grow. And so I think, I think at one point there was Harry Potter being made here. There was Star Wars we've made. This is some of the biggest series, mass market, I suppose, entertainment properties, as well as new ones being birthed, whether that's No Man's Sky or The Room, or the incredible growth that we see across different small studios that growing up and releasing their games. It's great. I love seeing it.
It's quite something. It really, and you know what I mean. Of course, fully aware of how exciting Guildford is. I've been here for all of my career as well. But even sitting here talking about it, there's those guys. I forgot about. It really is a microcosm. It's wonderful. So why do you think Guildford has become so important to the games industry? I mean, aside from that initial, it's close to London, we can set up here and it won't be quite so expensive. What's kind of become the legacy of Guildford? Why is it so important?
I think it's the people for me, because obviously you had a few of the bigger studios around, like EA, like Bullfrog, like Criterion, that kind of drew people in to the area, and then they worked with each other and spawned other studios and grew together, and then I think that growth and that passion's attracted more people in. But the thing that's that keeps all of these studios going is that talent that stays in this area, and I think it's because it's not a big city like London, so you all come together. There's only so many pubs, there's only so many restaurants, there's only so many places and shops and things that you're always going to bump into people that you know and have a chat about things, and it kind of keeps that sense of community in a bit more of a village way than being in San Francisco or something does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the greatest examples of that is The Guardian ran the Hollywood of Games piece years and years and years ago. Without even realising, they chose a stock photo of Guildford that featured a games developer. It's fantastic. Mike Ducker just walking down Guildford High Street on the front of The Guardian. Like, what? Did they plan that? Not at all. Brilliant. But it's that there's even in never mind the individuals driving through Guildford as an outsider, as someone outside of games, you wouldn't even realise how many studios you're going past.
No.
They're all just tucked away, one up here, one's over here, and you wouldn't even know that that's actually where a studio is. And yet there's 20, 30 now I think that we've managed to build up to. It's quite something.
Yeah, and it's I think that you can't understate actually I think it was Simis and Simis were making the simulation games and Bullfrog were making their games, and they were early pioneers in actually the more broadly the national gaming industry really. When I started at Electronic Arts, there was 40 employees, and EA was working with numerous sort of small independent developers at the time. Didn't really have a UK-based development house, but had that relationship here with Bullfrog, and so there was a constant sort of connection and an injection of investment into this area, and that seed is I think where lots of it starts from, because then you get if that's Criterion spawned from the research part, Canon Research, and looking at in particular 3D rendering engines at the time before we really knew what they were engines. So that just attracts, doesn't it? It's a magnet.
Yeah, and I suppose you're right in the sense that it grows and it sheds and it plants off else, and that just keeps moving and going. And as we lose, the sorry days that we lose some of those bigger older studios, Lionhead for example, the benefit of that has been all of the talent that was pushed out into various studios that already existed, but then all of those studios that popped up because people were looking to siphon their creativity elsewhere without the studio. So it definitely continue, and I guess that will carry on forever. I mean, imagine Guildford in 20 years. We could have 40. We could have 40 game studios, maybe 50.
Wow. The future work, though, I mean, if we think about the situation we're in now, will it be like that?
50 studios in name, everyone working.
Yeah, that's right, I suppose. Yeah, we'll be all somewhere else, maybe. I don't know.
It's an interesting thought. What are you most excited about? If we're talking about the history of kind of the future of Guildford, and we're talking about Criterion and how that kind of fits in, what are you most excited about in the near future? I mean, lockdown has obviously meant that a few things are slightly out of whack, I suppose, and dates and releases and things can be messed with ever so slightly. But what are you most excited about as far as the future at this moment?
I think, the main thing for me at the moment is just finding new ways to work. I think the more we bring in new people into the studio and the more we try and kind of re-envision what Criterion means and what it means to make video games, and finding ways to do things. Over the last 5 years, we've been pushing to not crunch. We don't crunch at all. At Criterion, we've developed a number of games like that, and I think, and we're bringing in a new generation of people that are growing up with a different kind of games and expect to make things in a different way and work in a different way. It doesn't always have to be in a studio. It's at home, which is on purpose at the moment, but we're seeing development across EA where we're sharing groups of people together and finding different ways of doing things that we hadn't even thought of
considered
before.
Yeah. That, I mean, it's certainly the upside of the situation that we're in, is that we're all learning, oh no, wait, I can do even better stuff here without having to go so far. But there are still those moments where you need to be with your team, and trying to balance the two things is tricky, I imagine, especially with a much bigger team than the three people I work with on a daily basis.
Yeah, but people come join the studio now when, like I did, say 19, 20 years old, and they come in already having made games. There's nothing to stop people making games at home, their own indie games, publishing things that we wouldn't have even thought possible as a whole studio 10, 15 years ago, and now that's how they're starting in our industry. So it's going to be amazing to see where they take
could
things
see a real jump,
forward.
a progression jump in some cases.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point, isn't it? In that is the question you ask at interviews, like, well, I want to get into games. Oh, really? How many games have you made?
Yeah.
Because it used to be, I think I want to get into games, but I've never made any, so I don't really know. Now it's people, it's straightforward. There's the barrier to entry is pretty much as low as it can get, and I think it leads me a little bit to the past where the one or two people making a game. But if you want to make, we're making a Need for Speed game here, and it's a significant undertaking which has a huge amount of expectation and the opportunity that we're bringing. The thing that excites us is we've got an opportunity to bring our own particular take on things back into Need for Speed. and we're going to do that with a group of people that have done it before and a group of people that absolutely haven't done it before. And where those two kind of come together, I really think sort of magic happens.
That's it. That's the interesting space.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How are you, I mean, you spoke about interns earlier, so how are you making sure they integrate? Because that's a huge part of the Guildford scene, right? The culture and the going to the 5 pubs that we frequent and all of that kind of stuff and getting to know people. And, you know, for a lot of young developers, I think making friends, not, you know, getting your first job in a studio is a huge deal, but then making friends with someone at a studio that you really respect is such a like, oh my God, I can't believe they're talking to me kind of thing. So how do you integrate and ensure that those interns are getting the full, for want of a less cheesy term, Guildford experience whilst being essentially remote or here every, you know, now and then?
Well, a bunch of it is the people, but actually behind the scenes here that are involved in, you know, the onboarding process that we've got. 'Cause it's not just actually interns, but it's, you know, we've hired quite a few people in the last 6 months, and some of them have never seen this office, except in pictures and things. And so there's certainly a very you get a connection to a location for sure, because that's what we're talking about with Guildford. Then you get a connection to the walls around you, because of the people that are in it, and so we can actually, you know, drive those remotely. There's a handoff from one set of interns to another, so there's that cool. Sort of an impart of, hey, this is how it's gone for us, and these are the things to be excited and to look out for. And then there's the particular crafts that they're involved in, you know, really take it seriously, because I think that there's this sort of creative camaraderie around either a craft or a studio or a game type or whatever it may be that sort of brings you together. And so it's incredibly welcoming when someone is new. Let me look after you. Let me give you the insights that perhaps, you know, I was given, or perhaps I wasn't given. But there's a real desire from our teams to take care there. They're not, unless they live here. It's more difficult for them to get, you know, that feeling of what is it like to be in and around the environment outside of, you know, your particular studio that you're working for, which is tough to manage. But in terms of sort of getting people connected, we work quite hard at that.
Yeah, we do. Some of the things we've been doing, I think, since we kind of evolved Criterion over the last few years, of introducing things like Who Am I's, where everybody in the studio has 5 minutes to introduce themselves. We kind of take cool. Every week we should really pick names out of a hat, but every week someone kind of steps forward, someone who's been here a while or someone who's brand new gets to share a little bit about their journey, something they'd like people to know about them. So we try and trigger some of those social moments. That's kind of spawned into a quiz at the moment about people. Everyone loves a quiz in lockdown.
Oh my
gosh,
we
have a couple of different quizzes a week.
That became a quiz about the people. How well do you know? How well do you know your people? So
it's really cool.
There's some smart, fun things happening there, isn't there? For sure.
And I suppose that's all part of it, and again, you know, feeds into the bigger Guildford ecosystem. But just because you've got a team where each person is allocated a certain job doesn't mean that each of those individuals is only ever going to do that thing. And even if it's just a passing comment, or it's a coffee stain on a bit of paper that ends up being turned into a character, whatever it may be, there are so many of those little interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis that end up, you know, sparking something else or finding a solution for something that you've been really struggling with just from having one person look at it for, you know, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So fostering that environment within lockdown, remotely, all of that kind of stuff is very, very important. So that's really cool. Really cool. I might start doing 2 quizzes.
Well, on that particular point, though, I think that's one thing that you feel like you miss is that, I know I was a big fan of the overheard conversation, or, you know, certainly when we're in here, it's a very open. It's a very open environment, and there's no barrier to entry really of getting involved in something, because we think of the context and constraint, and people bring their creativity. So we don't try and say you're going to be doing this for this period of time. There's clearly roles and responsibilities that are aligned, but there's a lot of movement quite frequently inside our cycles because of the way that we've changed making, the way that we go about making games. So it's important for us to continue thinking about how that evolves over this probably extended period of time that we're going to be doing this. And so I think that we come back to thinking about constantly learning, and I think the first 3 or 6 months of this, it was like, well, let's just apply what we did in the office to, well, we just won't be in the office and we'll just do it all the same. And
quickly
that
learn.
doesn't work.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, much like game development, this whole working from home thing has been a process. It is learning, it is finding
completely.
stoppers, it's working out how to get around them and you know, kind of having it better for next time.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff we're doing is looking back at the philosophies and beliefs we have as a studio. And one of the things we tried to do is, you know, not hide away in a room. We always try and keep things open to encourage some of those overheard, whether it's people discussing a design around a whiteboard or people reviewing a build. And I think that's probably the one we've missed most is just someone in the corner playing the software and everyone just walking past and commenting and having those little discussions. And we've started to try and find ways to recreate that in the virtual space by just letting people know it's happening, rather than just keeping the Zoom meeting private and locked away. It's just, if you're interested, this thing's happening over here, just come and look over our shoulder and see. So it's just...
Yeah, that's right. I think and there are some ways because we feel like we're going to go to some sort of hybrid model, and we've been fortunate where we've had instances quite recently where we've actually had to come in here to actually look at the same panel, right? Because we were working on something, and are we all seeing the same thing here, or are we talking about the same thing? And actually, the only solution was to look at the same screen.
Makes sense.
And that's quite difficult to do remotely. But there's many things that do work, and I think that it's much like our sort of iterative philosophy: build it, play it, change it. That more times through that loop, the better the thing gets, and so it'll be true for come up with an idea of how to do this and try it, and then ask yourself, is it better? And if it's
start
not,
building out your process.
That's right, and change things and just review and adapt.
Yeah, very interesting. So going back to the industry as a whole, but obviously then focusing on Guildford a little bit, what challenges have you seen the industry kind of come up against in your careers, and how would you say they've kind of been solved within the Guildford Games ecosystem? An example of?
That's an interesting question. Well, you touched a little bit about how growth happens. Growth is either through success or actually through failure, I think that we've all sort of worked our way through times where it's been great and times when it hasn't been so great, and that how you adapt to adversity and how adversity leads to opportunity. So I think I've seen that here lots. Like we see studios grow and then have some challenges, and then they change or they shrink, and that actually gives new opportunity for the people affected there. And people come to games because they love games first, I think, rather than it's just going to pay my bills. And so there's always that sort of spark of wanting to start something. So actually the way that the area has responded to adversity that's been seen in fluctuations in how the industry works, or the cyclical nature of it, sometimes it seems, is actually a function of its growth as well.
Yeah, I think the thing I like about Guildford, certainly recently, is how they've kind of grabbed the opportunities coming out of that. I think obviously as the games industry's grown and there's more, it used to be very big companies could make games. You had to have the publisher, you had to have the big deals, but now as the industry's evolved to allow people to publish their own things and break out on their own and ship indie things, that's helped the opportunity of that growth.
Largely do it all yourself. You can really.
And whether that's someone like Hello Games breaking out 2 or 3 people and then finding the big deal, or whether it's someone publishing their own VR game on Steam. I think there's examples of that all around Guildford, and then there's obviously the big company like Criterion and EA who has the support to do something different or supermassive. I think the breadth of opportunity wasn't there necessarily 10, 15 years ago. I think that's fascinating.
I think one of the biggest changes that we've had as well in terms of how things have moved on is how more open it all feels.
Yes.
Like I think certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, where I think we feel more open than we would have done in the past. Where it's been quite closed and don't share your secrets. And okay, you can still be open and not share your secrets.
Yeah, it really took a long time for games to get to a point where they were, okay, well, I mean, I shouldn't say anything. I might be breaking an NDA, and then it's like, no, you just need to understand what's knowledge sharing and what's saying things that you're not supposed to be saying. Yeah. And if we're talking about processes, talking about programs, talking about things that will help development, we should all be talking about that. But the NDAs, especially with younger developers, I tend to find NDAs put the fear of God into them. And they
Yeah,
don't say
you kind of treat it like this binary thing, like, oh, I've signed this thing, so therefore I can't say anything.
Anything. Yeah.
No, you can still talk. It's just
Exactly.
understand what is, a secret you need to.
And I feel like we're definitely getting to that point where, with the supermassive games nights and the few other bits and pieces, the Guildford Games Festival, obviously, we're starting to integrate a bit more as far as developers. Because before, every studio I've worked in Guildford, it's been, we're going down the pub with Codemasters, we're going down the pub with Xbox, we're going down, whatever it may be. But now I tend to come into Guildford for those events where everyone's going to be in a room together. You can talk to people from all kinds of different studios and watch them fail or succeed at playing a video game, whatever may be happening. And it's a much more useful environment because you're there not to let steam off after work, but to have a conversation with people. There's kind of a work environment, but it's not quite, and you can still get that kind of really important knowledge sharing. And that certainly wasn't around when I started doing this.
No.
So yeah, slowly but surely.
You're right, and you also had this moment where you'd be like, oh look, this person's talking to that company, and you'd be like,
everyone freaks out.
Oh my god, are they going to leave or whatever? It's, if you've got a great thing going on, then that's what's going to keep people enjoy it. But the sharing of how you do stuff and the telling of the stories is just super valuable.
Absolutely.
And I still don't think we do enough of that.
We don't.
It's sometimes very hard to break out of you're sort of seeing your own horizons. So it's important for us to sort of be there. I think for each other, and I'll certainly encourage our people to get out and talk and encourage others to knock on the door and say hello.
Fingers crossed one day we'll be able to do it all again.
That's true.
Can you imagine one fine day when we can all hang out together in public? Amazing. So along those lines, talking about people knocking on doors and getting involved in something that they may not be involved in already, how can we encourage that really vital new blood, for want of a better term, to the Guildford development scene?
There's numerous ways that we do that, and we found years ago we used to call these things bluebirds because they used to fly in through the windows and they were games, and we still get those coming into the mailbags with people saying, because we still look at our mailbag and we reply to stuff on there.
That's cool.
But they'll come in that way, or I'm looking over there because Kath's over there, and Kath is very much involved in that sort of local outreach, because it comes from opening your arms out and reaching out, as well as saying that the doors are open. So it's that local outreach. It's our open days that we run. It's the connections that we ask and encourage our people to have with their local areas as well. One of our interns this year is our first intern that actually came to us through an open day as a year 10 student. So, but those open days are really valuable for us because there's one thing about wanting to get into games because you love games. The other one was, I didn't even know there was a career for someone like me in making games. And that's where I think, we're starting to be in that area of people not realising the breadth of roles that might be available to them. And actually more of an outreach further, or younger actually, which is this, an encouragement of talent to come in that might not think that games or tech is necessarily for them, or that it's very much a white male dominated industry, and we need to be really deliberate about making it really clear that this is a welcoming environment for all sorts of talent, because that's what we need. As we grow, we need this diversity of thought.
Well, we need diversity of thought, we need diversity of stories. Yeah, there's almost too much to learn.
When I started, it was an engineer and an artist, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
There was a producer. Oh, okay, what does a producer do? Well, kind of all the bits that this person doesn't do. Now you look at it and
still
it's...
not sure.
Yeah, still not sure. Yeah.
So every producer is tired of that comment.
Keeps trying to
we all do
remind me.
it.
What is it I do again?
That's a big thing that there's a lot of people in the studio involved in a lot of kind of outreach. We talk about the Guildford area into local schools, and I've done a bunch of talks and things down to years as young as like year 3, because a lot of it is trying to break that conditioning that anyone can work in this industry, and there are jobs for anyone. It isn't just can you draw, can you code. Those are really hugely valuable, and there's known career paths there. But are you interested in helping run a studio, or do you like languages to help us localize? All these different things that people don't even think about. and trying to sow those seeds and put those sparks in there.
Well, the
really
art
young.
of telling a story.
Yeah. And that it's all there. You
Yeah.
can have this. You just have to ask for it. You just have to learn this. You just have to put your CV in here. I think that's another issue. Like, people don't seem to realise it's that simple. Talk to someone.
Well,
Go to an event and have a chat.
And it's worth being beyond that as well, because we're very studio focused in this conversation. But as I like to remind people, there are, an order of magnitude more people actually touch your game once you think you're done with it, or once you through the process. Before it gets into the hands of a player. And I think it's quite remarkable. And then when you see those credits lists, you're like, oh my God, who are all these people? But actually, they're all doing incredibly valuable roles.
Yeah.
From royalty accountants to the areas where in test, where you're doing an online game, and you think that you've got it right just because the two things talk to each other, but there's all these other things that are happening as well that actually we probably don't even know about. Now, that stuff is really mind-blowing. So it's the breadth, actually, beyond just the core of a studio. The breadth that's involved in the industry is quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. We need to get the word out.
Particularly in this location, actually, because I think that we're probably unique in that regard, in that we have a lot of the electronic arts functions, publishing functions, marketing functions,
Security,
jobs, security, all over are housed here. That you're not quite aware of, which are all an important part of getting a game from creation into a player's hand.
Yeah. And certainly something that I've discovered, and I'm sure everyone in this room can say the same thing. You can come into a game studio as an administrator, as HR, as whatever. For those who don't have their kind of career path plotted out, every single person I've met, and I've gone, oh, that's interesting. It's gone, come and sit down. Let me tell you about it for half an hour. And before you know it, you've got a huge amount of knowledge about something that you never thought you'd even touch. And you can then choose to push that forward and do something else with it. So I feel like the other really important thing to note about Guildford is it is, like you said, open-armed across the board. We want to talk to people. We want to hear from people who don't think the industry is for them, but like video games and try and work it out for them. But it is about just getting the message out that this isn't, much like game development, your career is not linear. Like, you don't need to come here and just be this person for the rest of your life. You can come here and go, oh, I quite like design, and someone will help you, and you'll end up learning about it.
And I think that's something that we've tried to evolve a lot, certainly since I started the industry, is that level of inclusion in the studio, and that everyone's voice is important. You don't know where that next amazing idea or comment is going to spark off the next bit of development. It could be from anyone coming through, whether it's the kids coming to look at the game on an open day or someone just helping in the studio for a day. You want to be open for all of the conversations.
Critical that we build an environment that enables that to happen. People can actually be truly open, with sharing their creativity or their thoughts or concerns, whatever it may be. That's a real focus.
And I think that really helps if you have, for want of a better term, old guard on the team that understand the lay of the land of the studio, whichever it may be, that have that kind of pillar of, for example, this is how EA does things, and then you can bring in those people that can slightly, kind of just pull at the threads a little bit.
I think, but it's also important for us to, the way that we made games even 5 years ago has changed dramatically, and necessarily so. Yeah. The way we made games 10 years ago. I mean, when I took over here, it was about changing the mechanisms and the way that we actually went about doing what it is that we did, because when you're dealing with large teams and you want a particular, you value certain things, the manner in which we did things 10 years ago is just not going to work.
The world has changed.
And the people that we're trying to attract would if we went back and did what we did sort of 10, 15 years ago, don't want to do that. I'll go and do something else. Yeah. Experiences and tenure is great, but you've got to roll. You've got to roll with it as well.
You've got to be able to adapt. Absolutely, you've got to be able to again with the processes, look at how you're doing things. Oh, wait a second, that took up too much time, and this was far too expensive, and over budget.
Well, I'm not hearing from that person's voice over there.
Yeah. Or it can be It can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as we've got a room of 50 people, and 3 of them I don't feel like they're getting a chance to say anything. If they don't want to say anything, that's fine. But because I suppose within games you can also attract fairly loud personalities, and then those quieter personalities could very easily be pushed to the side. Gosh, I'd never thought about that because I'm a loud personality.
Well, I mean, that's a big part of what we're doing. That's the thing about saying if you want diversity of thought, you've actually got to go and look for it,
Absolutely.
and you've got to have an environment that enables it to come out.
Yeah, and really be protected as well within the space that it's in. Okay, so if you were a brand new games developer arriving in Guildford, has a job lined up, what else would you recommend that they look into, speak to, go, where else would be important as far as you guys are concerned?
First of all, just engage yourself in what it is that you're doing, but keep your head up and look around and get connected. Mm-hmm. We were talking about it a little bit. There's so much going on, and there's so many different types of things happening too. That it's go for what I'm just a big fan of someone go chasing their passion and going for that and really going for it. But get your head up and have a look around and make sure you listen and learn.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. I think there's a bunch of places they can go. It's obviously not as easy to meet up in person now, but there's Facebook groups and there's a lot of different social ways that Guildford game developers are kind of coming together. I think if you're new in, don't be afraid of asking questions that you think might be stupid. Never do that. Always put your hand up. I think we are a much more inclusive and open bunch, and we don't know all the answers, but we'll happily help or point people to the people who might know those answers.
Exactly.
I think it's easy to forget that when you come into somewhere new.
And interesting, they both feed into each other very well, because you've got to talk to people in order that you're kind of making sure that both parts of that are
absolutely. And some people we know that can be hard. We want to attract lots of different people, and it's sometimes for the louder, more exuberant people, it's easy to walk into a room and go, I don't know you. That's Matt Webster. I want to go and say hello to him because I know what games he made, and you can spark that off. I'm sure that's happened many times before. But then there's the people who think, I really wish I could have asked that, and that might be the one conversation that both of them really needed. And you need to find the way of doing that. And sometimes emails, sometimes Facebooks and stuff can help those initial kind of barriers. Finding the way that works for you to get in touch with someone.
Definitely. I mean, wonderful advice, and I think that's what's almost key to the whole thing, is that we are, whether we're aware of it or not, and I know that some studios are more involved in the social scene than others, but we are all a community, and we should, there's never been an instance where I've gone to someone and said I need a contact at, and not been able to to have an introduction, and that's the games industry. For some reason, to the outside world, seems quite closed off, but we're not at all. We're really very who else wants to jump in? Let's go. This could be fun.
It's some of the legacy that we need to continue to shake off, because I think we were very closed off, and we were very insular and very kind of hyper competitive and not wanting to share. And I don't talk to them. They'll steal you, or they'll don't listen. What they do is wrong. But we're not like that anymore.
No.
I don't know any studios that are like that. I've worked here. I've worked in some in the States, and I know people who work in many different studios, and I think we're all very open to wanting to talk about the problems and the processes and the successes and the games we're all making. We're all here because we love making video games and we love playing video games, and that's the thing to remember.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that
Exactly.
there is always that connection. You can always walk up to someone at a games event and say, "What are you playing?"
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the most. You know what?
I'd always start there.
I should do that. I've had a podcast about getting into the industry for about 5 years, and every time I ask someone what's your advice, no one has said go and ask a developer what they're playing.
Yeah. Oh, that's my first question.
Brilliant. I love that.
That's the route in. That's why we're all doing what we're doing at some point. Is because either there was a game that we played that made us go, I think I might want to get involved in that, or there's certainly a game that we're playing right now that is doing something for us. So start there.
Yeah, and make sure you're constantly aspiring, and that's why we play new games. Aside from loving games, oh my god, I want to make that.
All sorts of games as well. I think
Yes.
I think that's a big change. The massive rise in board games over the course of the last 5 years. And I've seen that happening here, but all sorts of games, and just that because you can learn something from each and every one of them. And
it's all design.
I'm sure we have.
Yeah,
I've stolen some things.
And I suppose that's another.
Inspired by.
That's what I meant.
We'll cross it out above your head. Inspired. That's absolutely fantastic, and I think that's why Another thing that's so exciting about Guildford and talking about the breadth of games is because before video games were niche, right? Video games were, a few of us play, you're a nerd, all of that kind of stuff. Now we've moved to a point where video games are mainstream and board games aren't even niche anymore. Like now they're kind of taking up that bigger than niche space. So it's all kind of constantly rolling around. I wonder what will happen next. Okay, this is the tough question. It's really hard. What would you say is the best game to come out of Guildford? And I'm very aware of where we're sitting, and I'm very aware of everything you've worked on. However, question stands.
I'm not sure I could say it was the best.
You can make it your favourite Guildford game?
Ones that I have real memories for. I was just reminded of 2 Points Hospital, because I remember Theme Hospital being made, and the team that getting involved in there at Bullfrog and just watching that game come together, or Theme Park, and now we've got things like Panic Coaster and how those definitely have influenced along the way to getting involved in Burnout with Criterion for the first time, coming down here, and the amazing times that we had making the Burnout games, making Burnout 3 and Paradise, and now working with Stella on both Paradise Remastered and the Hot Pursuit Remaster. So I'd sort of just signpost my memory based upon games. I think they're sort of like which child was coming around during which game was I making when that child arrived. There's sort of all those life moments, life stages segmented by games. I mean, Star Wars was an incredible thing for us to get involved in. And certainly I think some of the studio's best work in a very unexpected fashion, I think, from what we've been known for. I talked about Syndicate earlier on, or the very first thing that I saw when I started making games was just actually after Populous was something called Powermonger, and sort of like a bit of a forgotten game from Bullfrog a little bit.
Gary Castle talks about it quite a lot, I think,
right.
as I recall.
Yeah, I got some brilliant stories about that game.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah. But so many. I don't know. There's some incredible things that have been made here. When you line them up, really.
No, there are. I always love.
I've just spoken about the ones that were made.
Not at all.
No,
but
that's your games, man. It's all about your games.
You've done very well, Matt. Well done.
No, my personal journey. I think Star Wars is probably one of the bigger ones for me, both VR and that's me because I joined the games because I wanted to get into ILM and make special effects for movies, and it was kind of I was an artist back then, and that was my kind of, I'll just do that as a way to get into this other stuff and train myself, and I'm still here 24 years later making video games and having the chance to work on Star Wars. I think not only because it was Star Wars, but because of what we were doing at Criterion at that time, of trying to really drive a new culture, of not changing Criterion from what it used to be, moving away from crunch and trying to find a new way to develop that was around autonomy and new vision. I think that's the one that probably is the best for me, because that's on my journey so far anyway. I think looking out, I always love the underdog story, so something like Hello Games with No Man's Sky, that having worked with Sean and some of that team that spin off from a big company, going to go and make it in the
Change
world,
the world,
and then and they do, and they're still making that
do.
game 3-4 years later, and it's bigger and better and
It's amazing.
more amazing than you'd ever imagine. That's made properly in a tiny little place in Guildford. I think that's awesome.
I mean, I think if really hardcore No Man's Sky players had the opportunity to see the office that they made that game in, it's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. Never mind the game itself, just the fact that they were all sitting on top of each other and managed to make something so astounding.
That's why it's so hard to pick one out of Guildford, because you have that breadth, and even if you take a year when game launches, the breadth that you have from Guildford is incredible. But if you put 25 years worth of that's everything from the Bullfrog days to what we've done at EA to Codemasters to No Man's Sky, and everybody in between is
And the amount that's going to come in an even shorter
that
time.
competition, really.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. Once, like you said, once you start talking about it, it's like, oh wait, and then there's.
Forget about that. Yeah.
I love that game, and it just goes on forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
It's, we're very lucky. Anyway, guys, I've been very lucky to have so much of your time. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll catch up with you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.